Hello, my name's Stefan, and this is my channel, The Coherence Path. And the topic for today is when things seem to be a little bit stuck, how do you get them moving? So, there are times in our lives that things just get a little bit stuck. There's sometimes they get really stuck, and it's almost as if you have to get a pickaxe and pick away at things to get things to move. Open up a channel like in a river and allow the water to flow. But that's easy when you're standing next to a river and some beavers have started clogging it up before they got too much involved in their action. But it's not always easy as a human being, because we have beliefs in our thoughts, we have emotions, and we have what I call the mesmeric inertia, the habitual momentum of our habits. But there are also times that we may have a really good pathway that we're working with creatively, but we get stuck. This happens sometimes it happens a lot in business. Let's say that you decide to open up a restaurant and you've leased the building, you've sort of put out on paper how you're going to design the place, and when you start installing all the equipment, you realize that the plumbing is in a completely different location than you thought it was. You were going to put your sink in one spot, and now, if you want it to work, you're going to have to either reorganize the entire space, or you're going to have to get a concrete saw, cut through the concrete, and put in a new line to reach the downspout, where the waste line goes in the building. But maybe there's a possibility that you can't do that. Maybe your building sits in such a way that maybe there's somebody below you, or there's some other reason. There's not enough area, there's not enough space for the slope to be great enough. Whatever it is, I have no idea. But the point is that sometimes we plan things and we might get stuck. There might be some roadblock that just gets in the way. Or perhaps you start painting a painting and you get halfway through the painting, and I've done this on many occasions, not for my intuitive paintings, but for landscapes and other things that I've done. I'll start something and I'll get about halfway through and realize this just isn't working. This is stupid. And I'll get stuck. And many times I'll just paint right over it. Like, okay, let's start again. And then I paint the next one right over that, and it's the same circumstance. I was working on a composition, at least I thought I was, of doing a Harris's hawk in a painting. And it was one that I really have wanted to do once I thought of that idea. Because when I was a teenager, I did this beautiful watercolor of a Harris's hawk, and I don't know whatever happened to it. I always liked that painting. So I thought, well, there's nothing stopping me from doing another one. Why not? And so I started the composition. I found several photos of Harris's hawks and the positions that I liked. I thought, well, I could choose from some of these. But you have to create the environment that the object rests in. No matter what I tried, after 3 attempts, I just said, okay, I obviously have a block. I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do, because I'm not going to spend all the time and effort to render a beautiful Harris's hawk with a background that just doesn't make any sense. So I just shelved the idea. And that's sometimes what you have to do. You have to shelf an idea. So that's one solution, is you take a break. You just say, well, I don't have the solution right now, and that's okay. I'll just do something else. And that's what I did. I went on to design some Bigfoot images. I thought, oh, it'd be fun to do some t-shirt designs of Bigfoot, and I'll just work on that. So I got myself a little easel for my desk and got some little wood panels and started drawing away, and it's been fun. I'll get back to that Harris's hawk, and it'll be fun. But in the meantime, I can shift and use my energy in a different way, and by the time I come all the way back around to the arc of what is the project and idea of doing a Harris's hawk, I'll probably have that composition worked out. So that's one option, is we just shelf the idea. Now, if you're opening a restaurant and your plumbing's in the wrong place, you don't necessarily have the option of just shelving the idea and waiting, because you got bills and people wanting to move in there and do the remodeling and so forth. So sometimes you have to solve the problem. So another method that you can use is to look at options. So you figure out where the plumbing stack is. You ask somebody who knows, where can we move it? And if the plumber comes in and says, you know, you can move it exactly where you wanted it, you don't have to rearrange the whole thing at all. Then you know that, well, you can ask the question, how do we do that? And the plumber's going to tell you. It's not going to be rocket science. And so then you'll just solve the problem. Now, if the plumber says, well, I'm sorry, but the city's just not going to allow you to do that. You just can't do it. Well, you're going to have to go to another aspect of options. So I guess we have shelving the idea, that's one idea, and just putting it on pause. You could also just get rid of the idea altogether. Maybe if I just said to myself, well, I'm just never going to do a Harris's hawk painting. I guess I'm just not that interested. Then that probably represents the fact that you weren't really inspired to do it anyway. And this can be attributed to a lot of different things we have in life. But if you decide to not throw it away, you decide not to put the pause button on it because you can't, and resolving the issue through logical process doesn't work, then you have to go to plan 4, I guess, whatever that is, D, plan D. So we got A, B, C, and D, whatever. So then you have to go into redesigning the restaurant itself. So where you thought you were going to put the 3-part sink for sanitation purposes when washing the dishes or whatever sink it is, you have to think of how to redesign the restaurant, keeping to the initial design feel that you wanted, while allowing for the new criteria of moving the sink. So then you're going to have to work your way through that. You find out, well, where's the options of putting the sink? So then you look at those options and say, well, how could we work with that design? You know? And, you know, if no solution arises that's viable, in other words, if we can't have the sink there, there's no way we can even create the restaurant we want, well, then you got the other option, and that is to just not open the restaurant in that location. So then you got to go to a different location. And sometimes that happens. We can think of that in like relationships. Well, one relationship is just to walk, one thought about a relationship, if it's not working, is just to walk away. Another option is to just put your concerns on pause, be kind, and just see how things go. Another option is to communicate and ask, you know, whoever you're in a relationship with, because they're the professional on your relationship. They know as much as you do, or more, most likely. You can ask them, well, what do you think? What should we do? How can we rearrange how we're working together so that we both feel good about our relationship? Now, if you discuss that and none of that seems to work, then you might just have to come up with a different option. And that's what we do as humans. we experience different things in life, and sometimes we get stuck. And sometimes that's like our job. We might have a job and we enjoy the job, but we're just kind of stuck. We don't feel like we're enjoying the job itself, or we're not being able to get out of the job what we really need besides money. And so we just sort of feel plateaued, we feel stuck. And the first option is, well, I could just go get another job. But more than likely, that other job, unless the one you have is horrible, it's going to have some of the characteristics of the ones you have, because everything's consciousness and we create our own experience. So the next option is to, well, maybe I'll just take a break. Maybe I need to take some time off and just, yeah, that's it. I'll spend some time going for hikes and hanging out with friends. And yeah, maybe I just need a break. I've been doing it too long. And the next option is, well, let's see how I can relate and communicate with my employer or boss or manager or coworkers, whoever, and see if there's a way we can communicate and do things and spread out the responsibilities or whatever, so that everything works out better for everybody, but also answers some of the criteria that you have. So that's an option. Now, if you communicate all your concerns and requests and nothing works and everything's just the same, you have the choice. Well, you could either just, go on working there, just like that restaurant could be, it could still open a restaurant, maybe not to the vision that you originally wanted or planned, or you could just let it go. You could just quit the job, after getting another one, hopefully, before, and do something else. So there's a process that we go through when we're stuck. Now, how we feel is, God, I'm stuck. This doesn't feel good. And then let's go in that direction, shall we? So we've gone through the solutions, and that's just me mansplaining, trying to, tell you how to fix your problems. And that doesn't always help. Sometimes logic and reason doesn't really help how you feel. So how do we feel when we're stuck? Sometimes we just feel awful. We just feel horrible, especially if it has to do with a relationship or work or some creative project. Or, a creative project like opening a restaurant. Can you imagine the heartache and sadness you would feel if all your, dreams and hopes get stopped because the plumbing is in the wrong location? Or in a relationship, if it turns out that, well, your partner's not the person you thought they were. They wanted something completely different. Maybe you want to have 10 kids and, they want to live a monastic life. They just had, that idea all along. They just never said something about it. You got up and we're all energized to, write a song, and no words came down on the page. You got this feeling, you got this wonderful, inspired feeling, but nothing's happening. It's just an awful feeling. And on all those, levels of different things we can face, when we feel stuck, it's just an awful bit of business. It's like getting on a horse, and the horse doesn't want to go anywhere. The horse says, not today. You can sit on my back all you want, buddy, and I'm just not going to walk anywhere. I'm going to stand here, I'm going to bend my head down, I'm going to eat some grass. When I get tired of eating all the grass that I can reach, I'm just going to barely move to the next spot, and I'm going to do the same thing. And we're not going to go for a ride. So you might want to talk to one of the other horses, or just go for a walk yourself. Because I'm not doing it. There's nothing you can do. But being stuck is a very common thing. I don't know how often it happens. I don't know if there's a quota that humans reach. Like, well, during the course of your lifetime, you're going to get stuck 365,000 times, and whatever. That's just nonsense. But anyway, we get stuck now and again, and it just is life. There's nothing you can do to change that. You might get up one morning and go, geez, there's no freaking way I can face what I need to do. You're just stuck. You wake up stuck. Or you go to bed at night and, you can't decide about a decision you need to make for the next day. You're just stuck. Just let it go. Just, when you're ready, the idea will come. The decision will come to you. You'll make it. But it's okay. It's all right to feel stuck. Because really, you're stuck, so it must be okay. If it wasn't okay, then something would shift within your consciousness to change that. And sometimes we just need to admit, I'm stuck. And I think I'll just hang out here for a while and see how things go. Maybe I'll just do nothing. Maybe I'll watch TV or, go see a friend. And maybe there'll be something that happens either on your TV program or talking to your friend that just makes you feel okay. And sometimes that's all that's needed is some self-nurturing, some time to just, mull things over or relax into a situation. And then you feel a little better, and then you feel capable of opening yourself up. And it's when we open ourselves up that we've become unstuck. It doesn't mean we'll have an immediate solution, but opening ourselves up is the first stage of allowing ourselves to invite ideas. And then those ideas might come, and then we'll just take little steps. That's all we have to do. Take little steps and walk down the path where we need to go. And, in the arc of our life as humans, I don't know if there's, anybody when they were passing and, had a moment to summate their view of their life. I don't know if there's anybody who sat back and said, I wish I would have got more done. On those times that I had time off, I wish I would have just cleaned out the garage better. I wish I would have gotten through these things. I wish I would have, a lot of the stuff that we worry about, it doesn't even matter. What I think the biggest thing that concerns us, not only now, but, if we're traveling to the next experience, is that that we question how we've actually spent those moments within ourselves and with others. We care about whether we were gentle on ourselves and kind to ourselves, whether we were forgiving of things that perhaps we regretted, whether we were allowing ourselves to really express our creativity and interests, and whether we were kind and loving to others. And that's really why we're here, is to learn all that. Everything else is it's kind of noise. It's part of the human experience, and yes, we have to go to a job and, pay our bills, and we have to follow our interests, whatever they are, because it's just innately what we want to do. Somebody loves gardening, they're going to just go out and garden. You can't tell them, oh, don't do that, that's their passion. How would you even think that you could even stop them? They just love plants and they're going to garden. So why bother? And that's what we do as humans. We embrace the things that we're interested in. But really, in between all those interests we have, in between all the responsibilities that we have, there's us, just being ourselves and being human. And our core focus, our core reason for coming here is to just be kind to ourselves and be loving to ourselves. And sometimes when we're stuck, that's when we get to exercise the level of proficiency we are at being kind to ourselves. If we sit there and we just put ourselves down and let negative thoughts plague us because we feel stuck, that's not being kind to ourselves, and it fuels our feeling of being stuck. It's bad enough being stuck, but then, if we, pour fuel on the fire, I mean, that makes it worse, There's nothing worse than feeling, unmotivated or stuck or bad about something and then sitting there and kicking yourself. It's not a good situation, and it's an ineffective way to live your life. I know, because I did that for decades. I kicked myself for things that I regretted. So if we can be kind to ourselves in those times, if we can be loving, we just realize that, it is what it is, and just face it with neutrality. If you have let's say you had a broken leg. I had that experience once. Now, if I was to sit on the couch during that time that I had that cast and told myself, oh, you stupid, blah, 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 why did you break your leg, blah, 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 look at all the stuff you're missing, blah, blah, blah. If I would have just sat there and said all this negative stuff to myself, well, that's not loving. That's not being kind to myself. But we as humans are so self-critical of ourselves that, sometimes we can do that. Instead, I sat there and I imagined that I was walking freely, that I was running. And when I went to the hospital, well, I had a feeling first. They told me I'd have the cast on my leg for, I think it was 12 weeks or 16 weeks, something like that. And every day I would meditate, and first of all, I would ignore that I had the broken leg. Now, I'm not telling you ignoring problems is the answer, but this worked as far as physical healing. I just ignored that I had a broken leg. I just didn't even put it in my mind. I didn't think about it. I had the cast there on my leg. I had to hobble around on crutches, but I just paid attention to my good leg. And then I would meditate a couple times a day and imagine myself running, or imagine myself walking upstairs or going for walks with my dog that I had at the time. And after probably about 6 weeks, I just felt like, my leg's healed. It feels fine. And my bone had been broken completely through at an angle. I saw the x-ray. So I went back to the hospital and I said, my leg's healed and I'd like you to take off the cast because I need to get it back to work. And they said, no, your leg can't be healed. It's only been half the time necessary to heal your leg. I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but I know that it's healed. So they wouldn't listen to me, and then they got 2 more doctors to come in to try to convince me that there was no way my leg could be healed. And I just told them, I'm sorry, but I have a grinder at home. I can cut this cast off and take it off myself, but I'd prefer you do it so I didn't chance running that grinder into my skin. So they said, well, if you'll let us x-ray it and it shows that it's healed all the way through, we'll take your cast off. But if it's not, we're hoping that you'll agree to leave it on. I said, well, that's fair enough. If I don't want to take it off if it's not healed, but I just have a feeling it's healed. So they wheeled me into the x-ray room, and the guy put me on the table, and we had a nice conversation. He was kind of surprised that it was healed. I said, well, I guess we'll find out. So he did the x-ray. All the doctors looked at it, and they came walking over with the x-ray, and they said, well, we don't understand this, but your leg, the bone is completely healed. And I said, well, I told you. I just had a feeling. All those trillions of cells that are conscious in my body somehow sent a little message up to my brain and said, hey, Stefan, you're wanting to go for walks and running and so forth. Hey, your leg's healed. You can do that now. So they cut off the cast and off I went. So it's true that everything's consciousness. From the leaves and the trees to all the little animals we see, all of our family and friends, everything's consciousness. And that consciousness is communicating to us all the time. And when we feel stuck, that consciousness might just be saying, take a break. You know, you might be saying, hey, there's a reason why you need to just take a time out, because maybe that consciousness that you are is not ready to move forward on whatever it is. Whether it's a change that you need to make, some creative project that you're all inspired to do, but for whatever reason isn't happening. But another aspect is that happens through exercise is that, and this applies to art a lot, but I do believe, I know it's going to apply to anything, because that's the way consciousness is. So if you're stuck when it comes to art, one method to help you out of it is just to do, you know, random stuff. Get a canvas out, get a brush in each hand, even though you only paint with one hand. Get some paint out, every color in the book, whatever, and just start playing. Just start playing. You know, if you got blocks and, you know, you're building something and you can't figure out what to build, just start moving the blocks around. You know, just try different things and just play with it. You know, if you got music, just go pick up an instrument you've never even played before and just start playing around with it. Just do something completely random where you're not in control of it at all. And what that does is it allows your consciousness to sort of breathe. It's like the river. It's like the water goes down and it just sort of fans out and breaks through areas of the landscape that it couldn't get through before, because it was just going through that one channel. So when it rains hard, it just goes through there and stirs up new avenues and channels where the river can go. And that's a way it can work with consciousness. So that's another method, is to say, okay, I'm stuck, but I'm going to play. So you go down to that restaurant and, you know, maybe you couldn't figure out how to do it, but you go down there and you get a roll of tape and you tape out the floor and then start playing around with different objects, putting them in the room. And maybe there's a way that will come through that's creative into how to complete the vision that you had for the restaurant that you never even thought of. Or you might have a person come in and do that for you. That's the usefulness of another creative mind. And that's how consciousness works as well. So when we can't solve it on our own, when we can't communicate, we can't create the change we want even though we communicate, we might have somebody else have some input, because then other ideas can come up that we never even considered or thought of, because we're only looking through the lens of our own experience. And so the lens of our own experience could be one of those things that creates the block itself. Like all the resources and inspiration could just be standing right in your presence, but because of your own experience, they just can't come together. And it takes somebody else to shift it so that you can see it clearly. And I can't think of specific times, but I do remember this happening with me, that somebody made some small comment about something I was doing, whether it was, you know, building something or working on a piece of art. And after they walked away, you know, I received what they said, and then after they walked away, I thought, oh, that's quite insightful. I never thought of that. And it ends up to inspire me to do something completely different, you know, whether it's with that project or the next. So that's how consciousness works. It's always evolving, and it's life affirming. It is unconditionally loving, and there's no possibility of limit. I mean, literally, if you want to, you know, explore something, you know, you can just keep exploring it and keep exploring it for the rest of your life. And that's the way consciousness is. So if you have a block, then sometimes that's a good thing. Good things can come, new ideas. Or you can just take a break and reassess, you know, really what your vision was. Or you might just sit with it and just take time out. So blocks can seem like they're bad. They seem like they're unproductive, but they can work out to be the most productive things that we experience. So thank you for stopping by.